Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching The Wire Wrap, our weekly show where we discuss all the latest political developments ahead of the Lok Sabha elections. I'm Sravasti Dasgupta, and joining me today is Saurav. He's an investigative and independent journalist and national affairs editor at The Wire, Sangeeta Barooah Pisharoty. Thank you so much for joining us at The Wire Wrap. First off, let's get off to the big story that we are tracking today, which is the electoral bonds. Now, the SBI, after being wrapped by the Supreme Court, has furnished details of the electoral bonds that have been purchased from April 2019 till January 2024. Now, these details, of course, have been submitted in the Supreme Court after the court wrapped the SBI and dismissed its plea seeking for more time to furnish these details. Now, remember, we told you last week that the SBI had sought time till June 30th to furnish these details. That would be well after the general elections, but after the Supreme Court's wrap, the SBI has gone ahead and furnished these details within a day, that is by 5:30 p.m. on March 12th. To discuss all this, Saurav, coming to you first, you have followed this quite closely. The ball is now in the Election Commission's court, as they are expected to furnish the data by tomorrow evening. But of course, if you could tell our viewers about what really happened in the hearing when the Supreme Court dismissed the SBI's plea. There was some confusion about the kind of details that the SBI was meant to furnish. Earlier, it was understood that they would be giving a matched detail in a sense of who's given how much and to which political party, but that's not the case.
Right. So the original order of the Supreme Court, which came in February, it did not really explicitly say that the data has to be matched between the donor's contribution and which political party actually encashed the electoral bond. But it was the SBI's own understanding that it will have to match both these data sets and furnish the information to the Election Commission, which would then go ahead and publish it on their website. The SBI's excuse was that this matchmaking exercise would take a lot of time, and they were seeking about 6 months to completely match the data and provide it to the Election Commission. But the Supreme Court, during the hearing on the 12th, the Supreme Court made it clear that its original order nowhere mentioned that a matchmaking order was required, matchmaking exercise was required, and the SBI then, through its lawyer Harish Salve, sought 3 weeks of time to give the data, the raw data, to the Election Commission, which the Supreme Court obviously rejected and asked it to furnish within a day. And it was able to do it because the data in its raw format was readily available and it was accepted by the lawyer of the SBI. But the rationale behind asking for 3 weeks was simply to delay furnishing the information, and the court wasn't having any of it.
Sangeeta, I want to come to you on this. The fact that the SBI earlier said that we need time till the end of June, and then after the wrap from the Supreme Court, it was able to furnish the data in 24 hours. So what does this say about the SBI, and is it trying to hide something? What comes to you on this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, this is not a political party. SBI is the largest banking system in the country. Okay, and so is Election Commission of India is like the constitutional body. But when you hear both the organizations, kind of dilly-dallying tactic, then you really wonder what has happened to these big institutions, this country. Look at as you point out, I mean, like they're saying that we need so many months, and then suddenly after the wrap, you just can publish, you can actually furnish those details. And look at this yesterday. The Election Commission, at the press conference in Delhi, the Chief Election Commissioner said, we will update all that in time, in course of time, or something like that. So it's like even if the SBI gives them, all the details, but they will take their sweet time, to do this. So this is what, and it's a Supreme Court order, okay? And you are not a political party. Your allegiance is to the Constitution. Your allegiance is to the people, to good governance, to ensure that all the rights that your rules and all are set, you follow it in toto. So your idea is to actually, be not like a political party. But here what we see is this whole dilly-dallying tactic, because we know through other data that the largest number chunk of these bonds have been have gone to the ruling party. So whom are you trying to protect? Are you on the side of the people, or are you on the side of a particular ruling of a party which is at the moment the government of the day?
Saurav, of course, just picking up from what Sangeeta was mentioning, the fact that the largest beneficiary has, of course, been the BJP. Out of around 16,000 crores, over 55% has gone to the BJP. If you could tell us a little bit about the data that is available at the moment, what we know that the Election Commission is supposed to furnish it, publish it on its website tomorrow. But what do we know as of now about the data that has been put out by the SBI?
So, what we really have are the total figures encashed by political parties. And as ma'am rightly pointed out, the major beneficiary has been the BJP. So I think only that data in total figures are available. One thing I would like to add is that the Election Commission, despite being a constitutional body, has not fully complied with the Supreme Court order yet, because the Supreme Court had asked the Election Commission to forthwith meaning immediately, to publish the data that it had provided to the Supreme Court in a sealed cover back in 2019. Because in 2019, similar applications had been filed, and the Supreme Court in its interim order had asked the Election Commission to furnish the data to the Supreme Court. Of course, the Supreme Court did not open the sealed cover, and therefore it was never made part of any judgment or order, and therefore it asked on the 12th the Election Commission to forthwith publish that data, which it hasn't done till date. And the excuse that they are using, through, of course, not officially, through sources to media houses, is that they do not have that information with them because it was given in a sealed envelope. I don't know if that makes sense, because of course a copy of that data will be in possession of the Election Commission, but that is the excuse that they are using to not comply with the Supreme Court judgment. So in a way, the Election Commission too is in contempt of the Supreme Court order right now, because forthwith would not mean 4 days or 5 days after, right? Even if it decides to publish the data on the 15th along with all the other post 2019 data that the SBI has provided, it would still be in contempt of the Supreme Court's judgment, and that I think has to be looked into by the Supreme Court if it wishes to take the case up again.
Sangeeta, just if you want to add on what he's saying, that the Election Commission's role has once again come under the scanner in this case, that why has it not published the data as the Supreme Court has said that it was to be published forthwith. And this is, of course, the Election Commission, as you were earlier mentioning, that they have said we will publish it in due time. What does this say of the Election Commission really?
Just before going that, just to put out a bit of data, I mean, 2022-2023 fiscal year, 1,300 crores of that electoral bond money has gone to the BJP as against the largest opposition, which is 171 crores. 1,300 against 171 crores. So if we look at these numbers, then we actually wonder, and then you locate those numbers as parallel to what the SBI is doing and what is there, as you pointed out, the Election Commission is doing. Okay, you are pussyfooting the whole thing. So whom are you trying to protect then? What is your, so these things, and then as I mentioned, the CEC is talking about in course of time. He seemed to be taking it very lightly, this kind of, clandestinely supporting a political party. Obviously, there is quid pro quo. Or if there is no quid pro quo, then we as voters should be have the right to know before general elections happen. So what is your allegiance is to the Constitution, which wants you to conduct the elections free and fairly, but you are actually seem to be not doing so. I mean, at least it's coming across as that. So Election Commission, the spotlight is also in the Election Commission now. So as Saurav said, this is again violation of the order.
Interestingly, since we are speaking about the Election Commission, this is not the only development in the last week in which the Election Commission has been in the news. Election Commissioner Arun Goel has resigned without giving any stated reasons. Now, this makes the Election Commission down to only one member, which is the Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar. Earlier in February, the other Election Commissioner Anup Pandey had also resigned because his term ended. Now, the Election Commission is down to just one member, which is meant to be a multi-member body. Now remember, the Election Commission is in charge of conducting elections not only to the Lok Sabha, which is due in a few weeks, but also for all state assemblies, vice president and president's post. But this has never happened before, that the Election Commission is down to just one member. Sangeeta, have you ever seen this happening before?
Never. In
all
my
these
last
years?
25 years of journalism, I have never seen this. What I have never seen is also another thing, Sravasti, which is like, you know, the secrecy around it. There seem to be journalists who have no clue, only all kinds of rumors you get to hear, that the gentleman may contest elections, the gentleman is, you know, perhaps not very happy with certain decisions of the government, so he's shown the door, and so he would have been shown the door, so he's got, so all kinds of things happening. But interestingly, there is no kind of, you know, one solid line from people, from journalists, from reporters. So that also says two things. One is, of course, the that the you know, the journalists are no more part of that, you know, part of that corridor where you get to hear things, you know, so you're kept out of that. Okay, so there's a lot of secrecy that's maintained. And the other thing is, like, it's a democracy still, you know, we have right to know, was it the election commissioner, why did he resign, you know. So these are things that is quite worrying. But yes, as you say, that you know, nobody seemed to have any clue, and at the time when this very crucial general elections are at hand, you know. So then how do you, at least even from the government, there's silence, even from the election commission there is silence. I have never seen this kind of the level of secrecy that has gone on, and where the fourth estate is still working in a democracy.
Saurav, of course, and the fact that the Prime Minister is chairing a meeting that is stated to take place today to appoint these two election commissioners, because the post has become vacant now. But this is happening even as a petition has been filed in the Supreme Court challenging the very law under which these appointments are supposed to take place. But that is going to come up in the Supreme Court tomorrow, while the meeting is happening today. How do you see this?
So, also just adding on to that point, I'm not sure if any journalist has asked the Chief Election Commission during all these press conferences that he's doing about the resignation. If he would have been asked that question, there would have been some response, but I don't think.
No, just to add to that, on the WhatsApp group, he
Right.
was asked about it, but there was not him, but the
there's a WhatsApp group.
Usually there is a WhatsApp group of reporters. So
I see.
there is the spokesperson said no comment.
No comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So just coming back to that question. So when the law was passed in Parliament, the petitioners, the original petitioners who had actually challenged the absence of mechanism to appoint election commissioners, had again gone back to the court and said that the new law is in violation of the Supreme Court's Constitution bench judgment, which did two things. It spoke about the absolute independence required of the Election Commission and the requirement to insulate it from the executive. And number two, in the meanwhile, it put in place an interim committee consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India himself. So this was an interim arrangement, but of course the new law removed the Chief Justice and appointed a member of the cabinet. So that gives executive dominance over appointment of election commissioners, and this has really violated the first thing that the entire judgment spoke about, which is to insulate the election commission from any influence from the executive. And on the premise of this, new petitions were filed in the Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality again of the new law, of the new mechanism. The Supreme Court, of course, was in no mood to hear it, and it did not feel like expediting the matter, even though it was again, it was alleged that a constitutional bench judgment was violated. Once a vacancy had arisen. Now there are 2 vacancies. Applications have been filed in the same petition seeking a stay on the election on the appointment process under the new law. But again, the Supreme Court has not really, in the first attempt, the Supreme Court said that they are not in favor of staying the law and they would hear the main challenge to the constitutionality and posted it for the month of April or May, if I'm not wrong. The latest vacancy when it arose, the application sought an immediate stay again, but then the Supreme Court hasn't shown any urgency and has posted the matter for Friday. And now, if the election commissioners are, selected today and appointed with, the kind of speed the government shows in such matters, I think the Supreme Court will have no other option but to, I don't think it will be able to remove election commissioners, because there's entire procedure within the constitution if you want to remove an election commissioner, and I don't think that is going to happen. And therefore, the Supreme Court, I think, will act. If the election commissioners are appointed today, it will act, its action will not be of any use. Maybe for future instances it may help, but it will not help for today's problem that we are witnessing.
Sangeeta, you want to comment on this, the credibility of the Election Commission really coming under the scanner just weeks before the Lok Sabha elections, as we were talking about earlier, the electoral bonds case, and now the Election Commissioner himself resigning without any reasons. Now 2 more Election Commissioners are going to be appointed under a law where opposition parties have earlier said that executive control is going to be writ large. So how do you see all of this?
Yeah, exactly. This is like the problem is, it's like, it's not very too difficult to see the crumbling of an institution. And this is the institution which is actually assigned to keep democracy sailing in the country. Effectively, it's through elections that people vote, and and we want free and fair elections. This is a salient part of democracy. So that's why the importance of this institution is huge in terms of democracy. But that is where we see that this kind of arbitrary resignations. Nobody seemed to say, as you pointed out, spokesperson say no comments. Like as citizens, we also have a right to know. As journalists, you are supposed to ask questions. As Saurav said, nobody even asked this question because they perhaps also know that what they will be told. Or as we also see this whole taking over of the Fort Estate, a large chunk of it, doing only pro-government stories, and also these are all part of this, the larger malaise, associated with it. Okay, so that's there. So it's a kind of a, and that also everything is coming forward, and you can actually see it right in front of an election, which is going to bring in another government or the next government for the next 5 years. So this is something, it's quite alarming as far as, as a journalist or a political observer. For me, it's a very alarming situation that you are not able to speak freely, journalists are not able to ask questions freely to the election commissioner. And then when we look at the way the committee has been constituted, as Saurav pointed out, it's not just the executive, it is also the government of the day. Okay, so it's this government of the day is by a political party. Okay, so you have the prime minister and you have his minister, and with an opposition this thing. So your large chunk of your numbers in the Lok Sabha, if you see, you have a brute majority, and the opposition is only very the leverage is not as much. So who's the deciding factor? It is very clear.
But to be fair, election commissioners have always been appointed by the centre, right? So it's not a completely new development that the executive has so much control, but this kind of credibility crisis is perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. This is what, see, the government have always been appointing, has been always even in the selection of the CJI. Okay, but there is a system that you have to follow, and the CJI and all this cannot be so openly for any particular government of the day. okay, or any political party also, may not be in power, but let's say same thing with the election commission, okay, you cannot. So now that we are seeing this whole crumbling of the institution, the alarm bells have rung because of that, particularly because of that, and also that the Supreme Court's intervention, that there has to be the CJI, and the way the government has actually gone against it everything brought under that question mark. Why so?
Also, you want to add something,
Saurav?
Saurav?
I just wanted to add the absence of stay hearings when it comes to challenges of constitutionality, because constitutional challenges are very time sensitive, like we see in the Electoral Commission case, Election Commission case. But the absence of hearings in applications of stay is also very alarming, because the Supreme Court has not been, conducting extensive hearings just on requests for stay of a law. Now, of course, the Supreme Court cannot, without conducting substantive hearings, stay an entire legislation passed by the Parliament. That would be too much. That would be too activisty of the court. But at the same time, the Supreme Court is also not granting hearings for stay applications, where the lawyers from both sides will have to argue why an interim stay on the mechanism or the rules are required, because irreparable damage would have been done in future. So if they appoint the election commissioners, there's no way of going back, and the court cannot order it. And therefore, this absence of hearing, what we are seeing today is that the judges come, they sit, and then they make up their minds probably, and they just say that we are not inclined to stay the legislation. But there are no hearings taking place. Therefore, even people are unable to exercise their right to know, because people are not informed why there should be a stay or not, there should not be a stay. So I think this is a very concerning development in the Supreme Court, and there has to be some form of deliberation, open deliberation in the courts, and that's missing now.
Yeah, just to add, Sravasti, the same concern is also about the electoral bonds.
Absolutely.
It took so long now that how much money will the political parties, be it BJP, Congress, or any other party, will return? So so much water has flown, and that's also because these hearings the cases went on and all, hearings were not done adequately.
Just to add to the credibility crisis that the Election Commission is kind of facing at this moment, we've seen in the last 5 years some developments that have not been seen before. We saw the case of Ashok Lavasa, who stepped down after, even though he was due to be Chief Election Commissioner, he was the only election commissioner who had dissented in giving notices to Modi and Shah. So after that also we have seen the Election Commission not really acting against the BJP as much as it has in, for instance, giving notices to opposition parties ahead of elections. Is this something new, you would say, Sangeeta?
The urgency that is shown, as you said, in issuing those violation notices, or for MCC violation notices, to the opposition parties seem to be very quick, than actually doing to the ruling party. And a couple of stories have been done. We in The Wire have also done these stories and placed one against the other, and you can see the discrimination. So when an impartial organization which is aiming to conduct a free and fair election is actually doing this kind of thing, then a question mark is obviously put on its credibility. So that is what we are seeing. Okay, it is not that MCC notices have been issued only to opposition parties now. It has always happened. Okay, there is always a precedence. Let me tell you. Even in the earlier this thing also always been a precedence. But the gamut of it that we see is actually alarming. It's a cause for alarm for for journalists, for everybody who wants the democracy of this country to continue. So that is the only worry. The gamut has has risen, has this widened expansion.
The other political development that we have been we want to highlight in this week's episode is, of course, the fact that the centre has notified the rules of the Citizenship Amendment Act. This comes on the interestingly, this came on the very same day that the Supreme Court of India asked this SBI to furnish the details of the electoral bonds. That evening itself, the CAA rules were notified. Now remember, the CAA was passed back in 2019 and the law was notified in January 2020. So this is 4 years after that. 8 extensions have been sought by the centre, and finally the rules have been notified. And there of course has been some opposition. Opposition parties have said that this is a political gimmick, and some petitions have also been filed in the Supreme Court challenging it. But Saurav, I want to come to you on this first. The fact that the CAA basically wants to give citizenship, fast-track citizenship for persecuted minorities in 3 countries, which is Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. But interestingly, the rules do not mention the word persecution at all. So what do these rules say exactly, and what do we make of this?
To be honest, I haven't gone through the rules entirely in detail. But then, of course, the word persecution is nowhere missing, and a person need not, a refugee will not have to give any proof of persecution. And I don't think that really is in consonance with the objective of the entire law itself. So the rules are not in consonance with the law. The law wants to, provide citizenship to people who are, persecuted, but the rules don't say so, and therefore the constitutionality is suspect here. And I think this is one of the main grounds that petitioners have challenged in the Supreme Court. And there are also, and the only requirement that we see here is the exclusion of a particular religion. And I think when we talk about the constitutionality bit, I'll go deeper into that.
Sangeeta, of course, this is going to have a huge impact on 2 states, particularly going into the Lok Sabha elections, Assam and West Bengal. We've seen in Assam already opposition leaders have filed petitions, there have been demonstrations held. How do you see this impacting the elections there?
See, you have to look at the timing of the why it has been notified at this time, because it's like a very curious case for a journalist interested in that region. So there are 2 things. One, I see. Bengal, obviously, because there are 8 seats at stake, which is that entire North Bengal seats, which the BJP could do well in 2019. And after that, recent panchayat elections, if you see, TMC had actually gained ground. So BJP won only 1 seat in that panchayat, so there are over 50 seats. So, and then now they have to bring something as a game changer, because that I see is like completely aimed at that region and the Matwas and the Namasudras, so even Rajbanshi they say, but Rajbanshis are not very happy with CAA. All they wanted was an NRC on the lines of Assam, till 24th March 1971, because they say that we came before and we want to weed out the foreigners. Now you are saying that, accept this. But in Assam, there is obviously this kind of protest expected, and the petitions seeking stay in the Supreme Court were also expected. So it came from the State Congress, 1 petition, then came from all Assam Students Union, and also from AJYCP, Jatiya Parishad, which happened yesterday. So now the 3 petitions have, of the 4 petitions, state petitions, 3 have come from Assam. So the influence of all of it. And the largest chunk of the 14 Lok Sabha seats are in Upper Assam, which is the Assamese heartland. So that brings us to the question then, if they win 8 seats, will they lose so many in Assam? What is the game plan? So you have to see that the 2 things. One, the more the protest happens in Assam, bigger will be the impact for BJP, in Bengal. Okay, so they are harping onto that. And the second thing is that in Assam, they are hoping that the whole beneficiary politics that they have, indulged in, and they have actually brought so many lakhs of people under it under various schemes, so both central and state schemes. So that are going to give them sort of leverage. Okay, so because they have a reason to go by that logic also, because after the December 2019 huge violence that we saw, anti-CAA protest in Assam, and Guwahati looked like a war zone, and then the next assembly elections BJP won handsomely. Okay, so they are looking at that, so this balance, it's very delicate balance, but they will be able to carry through to see some good results in 2024.
Also, I want to add to this because you've, of course, reported and written extensively on this. The problem that Assam has with CAA is not what Bengal has with CAA. It's a very different, the issue is very different in these two states. So, if you could tell our viewers a little bit, because the Assam Accord says something and the implications are very different for the two states. And this is very interesting, and how the BJP has played this also, because in the assembly elections in Assam, it did not speak about CAA, but in Bengal, it made it all about CAA. So, how is the issue different in these two states in terms of implications?
See, if you go back to the anti-foreigner agitation, the 1990s in Assam, it was the BJP, Bajpayee and other leaders who were hugely behind that movement, okay. And that movement ended with the Assam Accord in 1985 with the Rajiv Gandhi government. And the core clause of the act was that whoever has come, Hindus or Muslims, have come from East Pakistan. There was no Bangladesh at this time. East Pakistan, March 24, 1971, and have been residing in the state, will become the citizen of India and also Assam. And but till January 1966, whoever has come will be given citizenship right away, but within 66 and 71, they will lose their right to vote for 2 terms, which is 10 years, and after that, they will be registered and all of that. The system, but then there was a lot of political, interference with that. So the system, the thing never got done. So then we come to the NRC. When the NRC was updated, they made everybody, the cutoff line was March 24, 1971. So they didn't even look at, they jumped that hoop, you know. And so whoever has got 1971 papers till 1971 are considered. But then 19 million people were out, and more than half of the 19 million people are actually Bengali Hindus. And they have submitted some paper or the other, some document or the other to claim their citizenship, okay, and thereby as residents of Assam. Now you bring in a CAA and you say that what does CAA do? CAA is saying that because of persecution, people are coming from Bangladesh, okay, and whoever has come from 1971 when the Bangladesh was born and till 2014 have been persecuted, though they have entered, so now we have to give them citizenship. And this lot is already applied in the NRC system, it's this government system, saying that no, we didn't come from Bangladesh. We came when in the formation of Bangladesh. We're from East Pakistan, okay, 1971. Okay, so now in order to make use of the CAA provisions, they have to first declare themselves Bangladeshis. Think of it. And there is this case going on in the Supreme Court. Say tomorrow, the Supreme Court finds this unconstitutional. Okay, because there are a lot of loopholes there. So then what happens to this lot? Who are going to suffer once more? They will be forever termed as Bangladeshis, which is not a very good term in, say, states like Assam or across Northeast. Okay, so this is one problem. I see that same problem being raised by the Matuas of Bengal too. They said, what kind? So you have asked this question about the word persecution missing. Okay, so why persecution missing means they will have to show some documents to show that we were persecuted, at least even a news item. Okay, but here the thing is that it was a very cleverly done thing, so that the other lot who may not have come before perhaps and were kept out of NRC and all that may be able to use this. But problem is that they will, at the cost of announcing themselves as illegal immigrants. Their whole fight is against that illegal immigrants, okay, that we are not illegal immigrants, okay. So this is a very, it's a terrible situation, you know, for actually I feel for this huge chunk of population who are nowhere to go. And the government has also put a stop to this whole NRC process of hearings, okay. Like these 19 million people who are out, they are supposed to, their cases were supposed to be heard by the Foreigners Tribunal, and they were hoping, many of them were hoping that they have papers to actually show. There may be a very minor error, and that may have just kept them out. Okay, you never know. Okay, it may you may sound write your name is Sravasti double TI, and in your paper it's been shown TI. You know, so then, but now the government is playing politics with this whole NRC numbers, but at the same time in bringing this CA at the fag end of the elections, where people have no time to even think of all of this, and then all they want is a vote, and then after that is chaos.
Saurav, I just want to come to you on this. Of course, as Sangeeta was mentioning, that all this is in court. The constitutionality of this is in court. If you could tell us what exactly the Supreme Court is hearing, because we believe that the hearings are over, right? Till December 2023, the CAA hearings did take place. What is the status of the case now? What is the Supreme Court expected to hear?
I'm not sure if the cases were heard in extensively. There are about 200-250 petitions in the Supreme Court. That itself, I think, is testament to the fact that the will of the people of India is not in favor of CAA. But also, I think it's a Herculean task for the Supreme Court to really, hear so many applications, and it really has two options: either to side with the government, and the government's point of view is that it has, unbridled powers to classify under what conditions it can grant citizenship to people. And number two, that under inclusiveness in a law is not enough to strike down an entire law. That is their point of view. So the Supreme Court either sides with them or holds the law to be unconstitutional. And because now the rules have been notified, the Supreme Court will have the time to actually see how the law is to be implemented, and that was missing before this. And therefore, I think the hearings, the Supreme Court did hear it time to time. Stay applications were filed, etc. But then never an extensive hearing, and now it will have to decide the constitutionality. And because I think the law has so many loopholes, as ma'am pointed out, the Supreme Court will have to test it on the basis of fundamental right to equality, and because the government does not have any reasons to justify why they are leaving out minorities from Pakistan, Bangladesh, other minorities from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and not including other neighboring countries. It has no reasons. The rules also don't give any reasons. It will really have to explain how reasonable its classification has been, because the test is really that: how reasonable is your classification? If the government has no answer there, I think it does not pass that muster at all.
One thing I just want to add, when there are a lot of these numbers, when you look at the Bangladesh's population, census and all that, you actually see, there have been a lot of these stories done in Bangladeshi papers also, that the number of Hindus, the population has gone down and things like that. There's out-migration that has happened. Out-migration can happen for multiple reasons. Of course, there is persecution that's also there. The communal forces are very strong, have been very strong in that country. So people, where will they go? If there is an open border, people will flee. Okay, but there has also been out-migration seeking jobs in other countries. So we've not been able to establish also, through a proper empirical study, that people who have fled have actually come to Bengal or to Tripura, to Assam and all that. We will see the anti-CAA forces also using these numbers, all of that. Finally, it's a human lives at stake, So this is something we as journalists also should be able to look at these numbers. How are they, or people who are associated with this kind of, population study and all that, we need to do those whole collaboration with Bangladesh or something to be able to see that where have they gone actually, what has happened, because we see the government of the day politicizing, communalizing it, but the anti-government, these anti-CAA forces also in a way very rabid, with using these kind of numbers. So I feel the onus is a lot of people like, journalists and others also to be able to, academics to be able to do these studies and bring out these details, because finally, migration is has been a reality, is a civilizational reality, you know. Yeah.
And I think just on the three topics that we had today, the bigger picture is that the government has simply failed to take people in confidence. There's been no engagement at all. They bring out these laws, there's so much confusion. You see what is going to happen with the criminal laws. There's been absolutely no engagement between the citizens and the government, and therefore all the confusion and all these challenges in the Supreme Court and the uncertainty surrounding it. So I think this whole thing about sabka saath, sabka vikas and sabka vishwas, the government wants us to put faith in them instead of engaging with us, and therefore all these problems are arising.
All right, so we'll keep a close eye on these developments, how this is going to play out in the next few weeks ahead of the elections. And thank you so much, Sangeeta and Saurav, for joining us on this edition of the Wire Wrap. And thank you so much to our viewers for watching, and I'll see you next week.